No, it's not working. It's not working. It's because the books are wrong shape.
What have you been talking about, Oliver?
Oh, what I was going to show about the pyramids was that if you're going to build a fucking big ass thing, the best shape to build a big ass thing out of is a pyramid. Because the pyramid's going to stay up because the two things that it's leaning on two things.
Yeah.
It's all the forces are perfectly.
Yeah. It's very structured.
Yeah, it's very structured. All the forces are perfectly pushing up against each other, so it just keeps itself up. If you build a box, you can build big ass boxes, but they don't last forever because as soon as one area gets weak, like the whole thing collapses. Like the forces aren't equally distributed.
Right.
But on a pyramid, the forces are all equally distributed.
Right.
So that means that if a culture is going to decide to build a big ass thing, the best thing to build that big ass thing out of, I'm like, I've got this.
Yes.
It's replicated across different unrelated cultures as well.
Yeah, because of that. So the Chinese had pyramids, the Egyptians had pyramids, the Mesopotamians had like ziggurats, which were like pyramids. The Mexicans had pyramids, like Aztecs had pyramids. The Mayans had pyramids.
Mayans. That was the word I was thinking about. I was like, didn't the Mayans? Yeah.
The North Chicans, I think, had pyramids, which were like an ancient
in
civilization in Chile.
Burial mounds in Europe, which aren't quite pyramids, but the same sort of design.
Yeah, they're just pyramids with lots of soil and grass put on top of it. And that's just because, if you're going to build something, those are the forces you have. It's not too like crazy thought about it.
And we've also been talking about if octopi have consciousness or if they're simply just intelligent, instinctual beings.
Which is really my point is that it's a really difficult thing to be able to establish because you can look at something and go, yeah, that's intelligent, that can problem solve and stuff, but then how do you go?
Apparently, though,
it's got consciousness.
If you study them for long enough, you see that each one has a certain personality.
Yeah.
So, surely that's kind of a mark of consciousness, right? If they're not just making decisions based on solving logic, they're actually doing things that aren't related to survival.
So this is the thing that makes them. This is the thing that would make it. That would suggest to you that they probably do have a consciousness, but then what Faith's been trying to point out is that that doesn't mean that they do have a consciousness. You just can't say for certain, and in fact, actually, there's still a reasonable amount of doubt that they might do. But then my point earlier was that you can apply that to basically anything that might have a mind or not. That it's, that are they conscious? How do you know?
Yeah.
Because the only way that you can actually 100% certify consciousness is if you're the thing that's conscious.
Yeah.
Because the only way to know what it is like to be a thing is to be that thing.
Yeah. But what I would say is that you and Joe were saying that you need awareness to be intelligent, but I would say it's the other way around because I define the soul. Because I define the soul as the intersection between the mind and heart, as the offspring of those two parents of mind and heart. So obviously the offspring of both of those parents, it would have, qualities of intelligence from the mind. So I would say that the soul is part intelligence, part emotion, but in itself a completely different being, but has traits of those.
But by the definition of your book, though, right? Consciousness is all relative. So, octopi are conscious; they just have octopus consciousness, whereas we have human consciousness.
Yes.
The same way that a rock has rock consciousness.
Yes, that is it. Yeah.
Okay, so it's getting a bit big.
I was going to say, whoa. I've been reading a book recently. Well, not recently, actually. That's that book, actually. And there, Owen Flanagan describes a theory of consciousness called subjective realism. Which tries to answer the hard problem in a really unsatisfyingly boring way, which is that what it is to be conscious is literally what it is like to be a particular kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which means that anything can be conscious. Anything's possible of being conscious.
Right.
Also, this is a huge simplification of it. Anything can be conscious. It's just that if you're a rock, being conscious doesn't really mean very much.
Yeah.
Because
or at least we think so.
But if rock consciousness really means something, then that's something that's so far out of our comprehension because we're so far removed from a rock. But
the key point is removing duality, right? The assertion that consciousness is separate from experience, where actually consciousness is just experience.
So the thing is that the hard problem, which is how is it that a mind can interact with a body, being that they're so two different things,
Mm-hmm.
is always based on the presumption that there is a distinction between the mind and the body. So it's not necessarily saying that there isn't a distinction between the mind and the body, but that seems to be like the natural position that people settle on when they think, oh, there's this big problem. But the thing is, if you start off with no position, that there is no duality, that there could be duality, there could be no duality, then like it makes more sense to say that there isn't an issue. Because like the evidence that you have from birth is that it's just you,
Yeah.
and all that you are is a
Right.
whole. You're a totality. You
Right.
are a mind and a body.
Right.
But then afterwards they split. But then afterwards, when we start thinking about it, that's when we split things up.
Right.
It's not like we're born with like our mind is born and then we develop a body afterwards, or we're born with the body and then develop a mind. Well, I suppose you could make that argument actually.
See, when you're talking about dualities, what I thought about was my understanding of the duality between spirit and soul, because maybe consciousness has more to do with spirit than it does soul, because I define soul as like the individual, but like maybe spirit, that I believe is in all things and of all things, is the definition of consciousness, like actual stillness. But then also the duality between the mind and body, I would say, is way more, like, it's way more clear, because if you think about heart, spirit, and soul, they're used as synonyms, whereas like when people talk about mind and body, they immediately understand it because it's so concrete. Yeah.
But then so like the thing is that I think this is where different arguments are overlapping. But I think that bodies. Well, I don't think there's actually as much of a natural dichotomy between mind and body as it seems there is. Because when you feel things, right? When you feel angry, when you feel sad, when you feel excited, and when you have all of these emotions, which people go like, yeah, that's a mind thing. When you have all these emotions where you're like, that's a mind thing, you feel it in your body. Like, it's not just a mind thing.
Yeah.
Like, when I'm angry, I shake, and when
Yeah.
I'm sad, I cry. And
Right.
when I'm, like, happy, I smile. And
Yeah,
I'm
it expresses itself through that medium of your body.
Yeah, exactly. And so the thing is that even when you're thinking about mind events, they're still, even when mind events are happening, they're still inextricable from the body. In those senses. So, like, emotions. You have certain things which seem to be inextricable from the body, like abstract thought.
Right.
So when I'm sitting around thinking about philosophy, like I might be pondering with, like the thinker on the toilet.
Right.
But that doesn't, like, you can't see those thoughts coming out of my mind.
Yes.
Which might say that, they're separate.
That's what it comes back to, like the difference between action and intention and how you can define them, because because of your body's expression of those emotions and thoughts, you can have a clue as to what you were thinking or feeling.
Yeah.
Right, because it's a sign, but it's not exact proof of it.
Yes, exactly. But it does imply, I do think that there is, I do think there's still an implication that they are connected, but like inextricably. Like specifically when
I believe our body is connected to our
mind
and emotions. Oh yes.
So that's also an Aristotle thing. That's like his version of monism, where he's like, yeah, okay, they're different things, but you can't have one without the other.
Yes.
That's his
Which
stuff.
goes back to the hypothesis of the ether and the four terrestrial elements that are all connected through the ether, that they thought was some physical element. Or for a while they hypothesized it was dark matter, which they later proved it wasn't. Yeah, the idea of the ether, or like a fifth element that rules over the other four.
Oh, right.
Which is what I systemized in my philosophy I created, which I named a zero lux. Did I tell you about this?
Yeah, you should. It's on your ring, isn't it?
No, Zyspexorus is on my ring.
And zero
The
light.
philosophy is a zero lux, which means the great light. Because if you think about lux, that's light. But then a zero, because I have that prefix a, it's the complete opposite of zero. A zero would be everything, like the complete opposite of zero, of nothingness. So the everything light, or the great light, would be what a zero lux means.
Anarchy is in like no state.
Exactly.
A0
Or
lux.
asexual.
Yeah, or asexual,
Yeah.
or a zero lux. So
Exactly.
The opposite of zero
Exactly.
light.
Yeah.
So full light.
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
Awesome. Do octopi have consciousness video.
I have no capacity to be able to understand what it's like to be a rock. So, conscious, not conscious, can't do anything about it.
You really
Although, Are
can't.
you still acting as a gatekeeper if you're saying the job isn't to define what does and does not have consciousness, just what does? Isn't that sort of the same thing? Like, you're not saying specifically this definitely doesn't have consciousness, but by choosing not to study it, you effectively are, aren't you?
Well, no, the thing is that when you're looking at things that could possibly be conscious, you could look at a rock and go, that could possibly be conscious, but I can't understand it, so I'm going to leave that to the side. But then you look at things that you could possibly understand, and then at that point you've already assumed that they are conscious, and you're just trying to work out what it is like to have that level of consciousness. So, like, the question isn't what is it are octopi consciousness. The question is what are octopi conscious. The question is what would it be like to be an octopus? Full stop. What would it be like to be an octopus?
I feel like you're the only one who can figure that out for us.
Sorry?
I feel like you're the most like an octopus out of the four of us. Exactly.
I'd love it if I could just ink right now.
Right.
It's like,
That looks kind of like, yeah, but they're at the right time, so you just, I think you could probably
But that is an interesting thought about the quantum realm, because like, have you ever considered maybe the soul is just quantum?
I've had an idea before,
Yeah.
which is that
I'll have like a tiny bit of
metaphysics.
chocolate.
So in metaphysics, there's a question: what is substance? What substances are there? And like, what is everything made of?
Yeah.
There's lots of different ideas.
Yeah,
There's lots of different types of substances, like the called atomistic idea, which is there's like atoms of substances. And
Yeah,
things
I was
like
trying
that,
to
or variations
about
of
COVID
that. Descartes had a dualistic substance theory, which is that there's material substance and then there's mind substance.
Right.
Those are two different things that they're separate, but they overlap on top of each other.
Mind and matter.
Mind and matter.
It's called
Spinoza, who's
Ooh,
the dude that I
Spinoza. I love that word.
It's
I think you told me that word and I was like, Spinoza. Ah.
Baruch Spinoza, he was really fucking cool, had an idea about substance, which was a monistic idea, so there was only one substance, and that one substance he defines as, he calls it God, but the word he uses for God is literally just a place name for everything that is. He basically says everything's made of the exact same shit. Mind, matter, bricks, da. There's different ways that matter can express itself. But it's all basically made of the same. It's all basically just made of matter.
Which was the atom. Everything is atomic.
But the thing is that you crack the atom in half and then you find quarks, and then you
right.
crack the quarks
It's
in
indivisible.
half, and then maybe you find...
Yeah.
Like, it makes sense, because the thing is that if you're trying to find the smallest thing that everything's made of, it doesn't end.
It doesn't end.
It doesn't end.
Because the theory is that space is indivisibly large, just as well as it's indivisibly small.
But then the point of physics, though, is like the point of like most modern day physics is to find that fundamental force that's uniting everything. It's very clear the idea that everything can eventually be boiled down to a fundamental force, isn't it?
Well, same with philosophy, same with science.
Well,
everyone's trying to find one unified idea that everything follows.
Well, I think that that's a really bad idea in philosophy, in my personal opinion, because like people have been trying to do that for millennia, and every time somebody goes, I've got the one unifying idea for everything, somebody comes along and goes, well, actually that's wrong for some reason. Which means I think that we're probably trying to solve the wrong problem. We shouldn't be trying to find.
Well, where does that desire come from? To have one
unifying idea?
one unifying idea.
So think about it in terms of how it feels to develop an idea. Developing an idea that is singular and unifying and explains everything is way more satisfying and a lot easier to swallow
than spaghetti.
Sorry?
Than spaghetti.
Yeah, than spaghetti. But there's lots of different pieces of spaghetti.
They would rather isolate one meatball than deal with the noodles.
Exactly. And then everybody turns around and somebody turns around and goes, that's not really that healthy for you. That's not a good meal to have. It's just one meatball. Right. And then the person who is committed to that one meatball is like, oh no, my entire beliefs about lunch have been thrown up in the air. I can't accept this.
I love how we're using spaghetti and octopuses to try to crack consciousness of the entire universe.
I don't know, I still think it'd still be in physics though. I have to admit I don't fully understand it, but like, it's still useful to, if you can boil it down to a single force, right? That's still a useful idea to know.
So it's useful, but it's not necessarily accurate.
Because you're unlocking more technologies, right? The deeper you go into things, understand how they work, the more you understand, and you can then apply that to the real world.
So typically, the more you understand, the deeper you go into it, how incorrect the last unifying theory you had was. So for instance, like Newtonian physics, oh, we've got the thing that explains gravity. There we go, we're done. And then Einstein comes along and is like, well, actually, no.
Yeah.
And then we've got a new unifying theory that's a lot more useful. Like, that doesn't mean that Newtonian physics wasn't useful as a unifying theory. It worked, it was practical for our purposes, but then when our purposes evolved, or our theories evolved, the purposes come along with it, and we understand the last thing wasn't quite complete. And the thing is that this is why I think that the unifying theory idea in physics is useful but not accurate, because we've been developing unifying theories for physics and science for thousands and thousands of years, and we're constantly just finding out that that's not actually
but you're
accurate.
getting closer and closer to the thing. It's not like you're just kind of flopping around going like from one massive exaggeration to the other. Like each time it gets more and more accurate, and you can see that from the technology that occurs. It gets way more powerful each time you make a more accurate model.
You can, but the thing is that the practicality of it, how useful it is, which is the technology, that's evidence of the practicality. It doesn't necessarily highlight the extent to which the scope of knowledge that's out there. Like, the thing is that we have more evidence to suggest that we don't know what we're talking about than we do to suggest that we know everything that we're talking about. Not that we know something, because we clearly know something. We clearly know a lot in comparison to what we have known. But like, how much knowledge is out there in the universe? Is it an infinite expanse, or is it that we're working towards some kind of brick wall of knowledge where we could eventually know fucking everything?
Well, that's the thing. It is interesting to think 'cause in science you think unless I mean biology and stuff that gets constantly evolves. You'd think that by definition there should be a finite, like however whether that is like so vast, the amount of knowledge is so vast that you would never conceivably reach it. But like surely by definition there must be a finite amount of scientific knowledge in the universe. If you were able to, there must be a point where you could physically understand every single process of every part of the universe and biology and chemistry.
But that also relies on the idea that the universe and the laws of nature and physics and everything is static. But like, we've got more reason to believe that the universe is constantly changing, considering everything's constantly fucking changing. The lights are flashing, my hands are moving, stars are exploding, everything's in a constant state of flux and death and rebirth.
Well, yeah.
Okay, Heraclitus.
You still understand the fundamentals behind it, though, right? I mean, there is some interesting stuff that I've read about constants changing and things like that. But that's why you boil it down, because, as you say, everything's in flux. And if you want to understand the principles behind it, you have to find things that make it work.
Physics and science is wrong. I'm just saying that they don't have a complete picture, and I don't think any physicist or scientist with an inch of personal credibility is going to turn around and say, I've got all the fucking answers.
Oh no.
At any point within history, because even if the point where we reach the brick wall and actually it turns out we do understand everything, how do we know that we understand everything and there's not something behind the brick wall? We don't.
Because you can't know everything you don't know.
Yeah, exactly, because you don't know it. That's the point.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
In terms of the digging down into in terms of atomism, constantly trying to work out the smallest division of everything, if you get to the bottom, or like, what happens if we get past string theory and then we've got another universe that's made up of even smaller atoms, even smaller quarks, even smaller string theories? That could literally go on infinitely.
Yeah, but I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe I've just got the wrong on it. But it just seems like your argument seems to say there's no point in studying all of this because ultimately there's no point. Because there's a potential theory that they could continue forever or that we'll never get the.
That's not my argument at all, because there is a point to studying it, as you pointed out with technology.
Yeah.
So, like the fact that we have aeroplanes.
I think that's why we're kind of at a different point of position here, because that's how I took your argument. There was no, because like a lot of your arguments, you have to admit, a lot of your arguments do boil down to it being futile, just researching that, because there's no point, because it continues forever.
No, they never boil down to it being futile. They boil down to it. All my arguments tend to move towards this isn't a complete epistemic picture.
Right.
You can't. My arguments are you don't have knowledge of this. You can practically demonstrate that you understand it to an extent that you can practically demonstrate it, but that doesn't mean that you can be certain about whatever the fuck you think you believe.
Okay, yeah, I get what you mean.
Which
It's
is
so abstract from your experience.
Which is different things. It's useful looking into it because that's how you get fairy lights and Christmas trees and faiths. Hey, but that isn't necessary. That doesn't mean that you have a grand unifying theory that's 100% correct because you have fairy lights, Christmas trees, and faiths.
No, okay,
Now,
I admit that.
Equally mathematically speaking, think about the universe as a pie. What's the smallest section of a pie?
Well, I mean, you need to go with more information. Like.
No, you've got an apple pie. What's the cut me the smallest slice of that apple pie.
Well, it depends what you define as a slice. Like, does the slice have to encompass the
smallest-
entire from the center to the edge, or like
what's
what?
this like? Assuming
Or like, are you going for the
assuming
smallest
you have-
fragment of this pie, which is probably down to the smallest particle we know, which I don't know because I'm not a physicist.
Some
like,
subatomic particle we don't
Yeah.
know the name of.
Bam, there you go. And then we find out that there's an even smaller subatomic particle. Cut that in half. Cut that in half. Cut that.
And then
in
it's
half.
indivisibly small, and so the answer is indivisible.
Yeah, I would cut infinitely indivisible because I
Yeah.
can constantly just say, well, cut that in half.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is that what's interesting about Spinoza's theory about the oneness substance is what's the biggest slice of the pie?
The pie.
The pie. Is there anything? Is there a bigger slice of the pie than the whole pie?
No.
No.
Interesting.
There you go. There's only like so that I mean like that's not like mic drop. That's the whole topic over.
Yeah.
But like that's a really interesting point that there is in terms of the biggest slice of something that you can have is the whole thing. So instead of trying to work out substance based on the smallest,
Right.
maybe we should try and look at it in terms of the biggest.
But
So
Right.
instead of thinking about what is the universe made of, what smallest aspects make up the universe when we're talking about knowledge, maybe we should look at what's the biggest aspect of the universe.
But that again, I could be wrong, but isn't that just avoiding the question? Because then you're just saying like, well, we can say with certainty, great. So in our theory, we know that the pie is a pie. We can say with certainty that there is a pie there and it exists, and the whole thing is a pie. But we have no idea about what it is. Like, it could be apple, it could be anything. We don't really know what's inside it. We don't really care because our theory just encompasses everything, and that's enough.
No.
That's not useful, is it? Like, the useful thing is to go in and find exactly what's in the pie, so you can work out how the pie works.
So it's useful thinking of it like that in the sense of it stops you going down different alleyways which aren't useful.
Yeah.
So for instance, like substance dualism, where you
Right.
start talking about minds and matter as though they're two separate things, where
Oh,
one thing can
okay.
exist, where
Yeah.
you can have a mind that exists outside of the universe.
Oh, but
Because this is what Spinoza is pointing out. He's actually he's writing this in direct contradiction to Descartes. And he's saying that you can't get Descartes kind of trying to say that you can have minds independent of universes because the universe is matter, whether minds are something else.
Oh, okay, I get
But
that.
what
yeah.
Spinoza is saying is you can't get minds outside of the universe because the universe, matter, and what that is fucking everything, and minds are in the universe, and they are part of fucking everything.
Yeah, okay, I get that. I guess the difficult thing is to find where to split up, what's split up and what not. So, like,
Well,
for example,
that
consciousness
becomes-
and experience is, like you're saying, potentially not a useful thing to split the dualism in that, but it might be useful. I don't know, it's just, yeah, but some things are useful to split down into their fundamentals.
But they're useful, but that doesn't mean that once again, they're useful, but they're not accurate. So, like, it's useful to start talking about atoms and quarks and string theory and planets and people and sofas and stuff
An octopi.
and octopi and faith.
Octopi.
Octopi.
We've come full circle. Also, we started with the pyramids, and they use pi in the pyramids to construct them. That's like one of the main codes. They use pi and phi. Fibonacci sequence in the pi sequence of numbers.
Fuck,
Wow.
we've had 3 pies. Octopi, pie, apple pie, and pie. Anyway.
That'll be the name of the video.
So my particular theory was about consciousness. You've got this whole thing that's the universe. The better way to try and understand why there are seeming substance separations between certain things like mind and body isn't in trying to work out what the different substance is that accounts for mind and body. It's about trying to work out what the different formation of that substance is, which way of looking at it. So the thing is that you can take a cross-section of a pie, and you can take a 2D cross-section of a pie, and that's a different way of looking at the pie and understanding the pie and being the pie than a 3D section of the pie.
Right.
Now, what is consciousness? What does consciousness involve? Being aware, being like a particular thing. And those two things are entirely reliant on time. Existing as a physical object isn't relying on time. I suppose it kind of is, but like the thing is that you can hypothetically imagine a table that is static in one place if time stopped, and that table can still exist in a 3D space. But what can't exist outside of the 3D space, what can't exist outside of time, outside of the 4D space, is consciousness. So is consciousness. So my thought is that consciousness is just existing as something in 4D that has the potential to exist in that particular way in 4D. So consciousness is a 4D existence. So what we actually are is like a 3.5D a 3.5 dimension being. We are a combination between something that exists within a fourth dimension and a third dimension. And I suppose everything exists within a cross section between a third and a fourth dimension, because tables are subject to time and what have you.
Right.
But
so space and time is consciousness.
Well, consciousness is an intersection between space and time, which means that
or mind and heart. Again, back to the soul, and the soul being the intersection between intellect and emotion. So the same idea applies.
So what's the 3D? What's the analog between the 3D?
So
that you were imagining.
So I suppose space would be the mind, because I associate space with mind, because the way I understand mind, especially in the creative process, is it is a place for thoughts to happen, ideas to reside in. Whereas I see the heart as the idea, the motivation, and then I see the soul as the combination of the space and the emotion, or the idea.
So is the emotion the thing that's happening in time, and the mind is the thing that exists in static?
Yes, in this analogy, yes. And then the soul is the actual creative process. So and this is the basis of my philosophy, is that first comes spirit, then mind, then heart, then soul, then body. It's the creative process, and you see this in Genesis 1. So you start with the spirit is hovering over the waters, and then you have this kind of space that's created because of the interaction between the spirit and the waters, right? And this void that exists. And then you have God speaking, let there be light. So then you have that light, or that heart, that idea, that spark, that light bulb, right? And then from there it expands, and that expansive part is the soul, which is the actual creative process. And that's why I associate it so much with creativity. So it's the in between the idea and the finished product, which is the body. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's a process. So we're made of 5 things: spirit, mind, heart, soul, and body. And if you learn to order them in that way, then you're going to be better at creating in general, creating more honestly, because you're allowing those elements to kind of exist and kind of flow together as one.
So it's kind of like, so the idea that you've got it's kind of like a virtue theory.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a Confucian virtue theory, in the sense that if you can align the different aspects of the soul and the mind, of the body, the different aspects of what you are, then you can attain some kind of eudaimonia, in an Aristotelian sense, but a kind of sense of human flourishing.
Yes.
If you can work out...
Or enlightenment.
Yeah, or
supposedly.
Enlightenment, or whatever you want to call that particular thing.
Yeah, that's the idea.
That's a really good idea to come to.
Because the way I understand it is the trinity between, or the trinity of creator, creativity, and creation. And so I have this one quote that says, "Neither creator nor creation will set you free. The answer you seek is found in creativity," or the liberation you seek is found in creativity. That's basically like, if you're going to seek purpose, if you look to God, you're going to be dissatisfied. If you look to others, you're going to be dissatisfied because you're looking outside of yourself. But if you look within and you use that motivation inside of you to create, then bam.
There's a really, so in Buddhist philosophy, in pretty much all, in all Buddhist philosophies, there is an idea of something called anatta, which might contradict that, might be complementary to it, depends on how you view this particular idea, or if you agree with this at all.
Right.
And the idea of anatta is no self. So that's in that particular theory, they imagine that we look outside of ourselves to find ourselves, to find out who we are.
Right.
We look to other people, we look to other things, we look to other desires, objects, all of which are empty, impermanent, and ultimately dissatisfying.
Right.
But then the idea is that when we look within ourselves to try and find the thing that we're looking for, the person that we're looking for,
right.
that is also impermanent, empty, and ultimately dissatisfying.
Right.
So the point they come to with that is that there is no, ultimately, if you align all of those things you were talking about, you don't find the eudaimonia you find, that the enlightenment you find, is in that there is no you anyway.
Right.
And that's where your peace comes from. As soon as you stop scrambling to look for a self that doesn't exist, as soon as you stop scrambling for the heart or the mind or the spirit or the soul
or
that
body.
comes out on, or the body that comes out on top of all of these things.
Right.
Which goes back to the unifying theory thing, actually. Like, if we're constantly looking for a unifying theory, like, oh no, everything's just body, oh no, everything's just heart, oh no, everything's just soul, everything's just spirit.
Then we take away the interconnectedness of everything.
All of them.
Right.
And it's like, I suppose the Buddhist point is that everything is everything, but everything being everything means that everything that you think is everything is nothing. Yeah. At the end of the day.
So it takes away the individuality that curses us, essentially.
Yeah, basically, and that's the whole point of, I suppose, in a nutshell, I suppose the whole point of the Buddhist practice is trying to deconstruct the idea that you are an individual, that you have to be a person, but only in a certain context. Because a lot of people seem to think that no self theory basically means that there isn't an individual at all, that there's not a body, that there's not a you, there being a
but that's not the point.
But that's not the point, because there is a you, there is a body, you do have dispositions, you do have desires, you are technically a unique individual in the sense that there's no one that's exactly like you out there in the world. Right. But the way that you picture that as being something that's special, as being something that's concrete, as being something that exists timelessly from the moment of your birth to the moment of your death. Right. That's the lie.
And it goes back to, like, we're just kind of grappling for security, for some kind of foundation.
For some identity, some idea of what it is to be Oliver or Faith, which just doesn't exist in the real world. Yeah. We construct that ourselves. And we're slaves to it, as you pointed out. And the only way that we can abolish that is, the only way that we can abolish that anxiety, that grappling, that constant craving and clinging for an identity that doesn't exist is to just let go of that identity that doesn't exist. Yeah. Let yourself move with the river.
Right. And I think, well, my point with the trinity of creator, creativity, and creation is that if you look to others, if you look to a God or to people to define your meaning, that's where you're going to find the most dissatisfaction. Because once you realize you're the creator of your own world, you realize you can create meaning as well. Like, there's no limitation to creating your own meaning.
So that's the existentialist response to basically the same, not the same observation, but more or less the same observation. Like, Buddhists and existentialists both make this point, both make this observation of a problem. Like, there seems to be a really big chasm between my idea of who I am and the reality of who I am in the world, or at least the way that people seem to construct my reality in the world. Right. The Buddhist response is to go, well, there's no reality in that at all. The existentialist response is to go, well, the reality is what I make of that reality. Right. Which is why the practical response from the Buddhist is to go, well, learn to get rid of that reality and you'll be free. And the existentialist goes, well, learn to control, not control, a better word that's less pejorative. Learn to master that reality so that you can evolve beyond the reality, so you can create your own reality. I don't necessarily agree with the existentialist response to that, because I think that as soon as you start, the only way that you can try and master it is by pretending it's there in the first place.
Right.
Like, you kind of got to go, yeah, there's a me, and I can make that me whatever I want that me to be. But by doing that, you've already admitted that there's a you in the first place, which is in itself a metaphysical mistake, because if you agree with it after, because there is no you. But yeah, I don't know. Sartre is a lot more intelligent than I am, so I'm sure that. Or wrote.
Great way to end this. There is no you.
There is no you. Stay tuned for next week.